as you feel like where people are so hard on themselves for something they don't know or something they can't do, that's bullshit. You just haven't done it yet, or you haven't figured it out yet, or you haven't given yourself permission to do it yet, or you haven't loved yourself enough yet to change your identity, or it's just not yet.
Welcome back, everybody, to Life at 10 Tenths, where we inspire you to live at the pinnacle of your ability and purpose. Today, I've got Matt Benelli with me, as always, and we have an amazing special guest. Eric Post is joining us today, and Eric has come into our world because AI is in our world. And I have a dear friend of mine that went to one of Eric's, I think it was a conference or it was a webinar that Eric put on. She got a hold of me and said, "Oh my gosh, you have to have Eric on. This guy has a deep, deep, deep understanding of what AI is, how it's being used, how to approach it, but then all the abilities of what AI can do." And so that's how Eric came into my world. Eric has created a company. He's the founder of Huzi.ai. He is just outside of Portland, Oregon, in a town of Happy Valley. And Eric, good morning, sir. Welcome. I'm so grateful to have you on.
Good morning, you guys. You guys rustled me out of bed early. I love it. Thank you for doing that.
That's our gift that we give to everybody. It's like, what time do you guys record at? We're like, early.
I love it.
We like to get it done. Then the rest of the day, Eric, you're going to feel like is just incredible because we've been able to spend this time together, do a little knowledge sharing, and then the rest of the day, it could go great, it could go not so great, and it's going to conclude with being an awesome day. So at least that's how I feel. I know that my day is going to end being awesome because we're going to be able to have this conversation. So thanks for joining us.
I feel like I've been put under a spell to being convinced, that things are great. I appreciate that because I need that this morning. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah. If you hang out with us long enough, we'll brainwash you into believing in all of these incredible things about yourself and morning routines and all this stuff.
I'm in.
Well, Eric, another reason that I was so excited to have you on is that it's one thing to have a background in AI and the understandings of all the powers and what this thing can do and what it's all about, which we're going to get into today. But you also have a background in real estate. And to the majority of our audience that listens to this, real estate is where a lot of people are coming from, and they're using AI in so many different ways. And so they're throwing like kind of mud at the wall going, yeah, I use AI. And the more you listen to what they're doing with it, it's like, well, yeah, you're writing property descriptions with it. I get it. Like you're doing, you got AI in your business, which is great. But there's also so many other levels that AI can be used in the real estate world. And kind of before we go down that route, like I got a chance to kind of look at like what you've built out in your business and in your world. And I think what's really neat is that it can be applied all over the place. AI is one of those things that I think that you can take a model of it and say, okay, let's apply it over here. And it works in the health and fitness world, the nutrition world, because that's another background you have, or you can apply it into this other thing. And it's very malleable, I would say, is from what I saw yesterday as you were kind of walking me through all these different ways you could use it.
Absolutely. I'm glad you got a chance to see that and felt that, because that was one of the original things I wrote down in designing this thing. Was I had this realization that what we're experiencing isn't this technology revolution. And that's, I think, what people misunderstand. I think that people, when they don't associate themselves with being a technology expert, a technology person, or they're in a certain demographic or age group, and so they just feel disconnected from AI, artificial intelligence, when really I view this as a creativity revolution. And I feel like anybody can be creative, even if you don't, identify as a creative person. Generally, you can learn the skill of creativity. That's a muscle you can build and a skill you can learn. And so the first thing I did was kind of feel empowered that I could lean into a brand new technology that was scary to me at the time. I didn't know how to advise my kids on what to, look at school and studying as my daughter was starting to think about going to college a few years back, and I could see this trend happening. So it was an empowering thing to step in and realize that if creativity is kind of the currency that I can use in AI, then anybody can do this, And so I kind of want to carry that spirit forward in building technology that didn't require the person to think like the engineer, didn't require to fill out the form and then fill out this box and enter this tag and whatnot. I was looking at it like if it was a canvas and everybody could just use the Huzi canvas and paint their business on it. How cool would that be? and art's so subjective, and so is business, and so is the way agents approach their businesses, and the clients are wildly diverse, and the geographic areas and type of properties. So I'm glad that came through. Is that you can be creative with AI, and you can just paint yourself on your business that way, and it can be yours, an expression of you, and I think that's really cool.
I'd love to jump into the kind of the first kind of area that I think would be really valuable for the listeners out there is for a lot of people, there's an incredible fear of AI. And there's some people that are embracing it, and there's some people that are just going like, I'm not going to give into AI. I'm not going to go down that route. And can you kind of like pull that back a little bit about like for the people that have the fear to it, like what is the best way to look at this thing that's AI out here? As I mean, you said as a creative tool, I think that's a great word right there. Like to like embrace it with that. But can you kind of like pull the covers back a little bit more on that?
Yeah, and you just tell me kind of what perspective you want to look at this through and how far you want to go, because fear to me is a useful skill just in life in general. It can keep you alive. It can tell you where your blind spots are, right? And so when I felt that fear that, okay, as my children's father, and I was fearful, I didn't know how to lead them, and I know what the Terminator movie turns out like, and all the stuff that you start to think about. And frankly, I'm also have some concerns about just society. We have this essentially seeming godlike technology, but we have archaic institutions, that's public education, finance, and law, and those big, massive institutions have a hard time adjusting to rapid evolving change in the landscape. So that gap, gives me concern. I have concern about society. We fight each other over Black Friday Xbox sale, right? But we can cure these amazing diseases now and figure out what's going on inside our DNA. And so it's these gaps, I think, that I was the most fearful about, because that's what causes this chaos. But at the same time, I'd also just recently got done with I had made a documentary and a movie about what was going on across the country when we had the riots and rallies and everything that was happening during COVID and whatnot. And I dedicated 2 years of my life, and I traveled the country to kind of just understand humanity and what was happening, on the streets, and why were people flooding the streets, and really what's the story here. And so I just kind of came to realize that people have got some deep, biases and political dogmas and religious dogmas and mental illnesses and things. And I was more worried about AI. And then when I realized, well, wait a minute, if we could have an intelligence that would kind of help sort some things out, provide some clear guidance, maybe that's actually a rudder, to the ship that we need, and not an adversary. You're right. So I really started kind of looking at AI in a completely different light. Of course, anything powerful can be put in the hands of bad people, and you have bad things that happen, of course, right? And I'm not a pro AI, but I'm very pro people. I believe in people so deeply that now we have a tool that should be a gift that we can stand on, not be afraid of, or hide from, if we really understand what we can use it for. So that was kind of a relationship building skill I had to go through.
Well, Eric, you mentioned it being this tool, and I think when I think of fear and artificial intelligence, like where I go to is understanding what it really is. And this gets me to go down the path of like, well, computer programming versus artificial intelligence. What's the difference? Is there a significant difference? Because if I said to somebody, hey, here's a computer program versus here's an artificial intelligence tool, they're going to have a different reaction. Whereas I think, if you put in complicated formulas into Microsoft Excel, it can do things that, the average human cannot do, right? That's the whole reason why we created computer programs. So can you kind of share just like maybe what really is, if we wanted to look at a framework of what artificial intelligence is built on, is it computer programming? Is it that basic?
To break it down, let's look at it this way. Maybe let's use artificial intelligence as the bucket of everything in this field. So that could be including machine learning. It could be large language models, which is like what the AI model that's behind the consumer-facing product ChatGPT. We could be talking about video generation, image generation. There's lots of different artificial intelligences. So that's like Kleenex. Use the term Kleenex to describe everything in that genre, even though it's just a form of it, right? So AI, just to be clearly, is kind of the bucket that holds everything. Primarily what most people are used to is the large language models, which they're chatting with Gemini, or they're chatting with ChatGPT or Bard or Claude or something like that. And so just be really, really clear that That would be more, that large language model is more like your Excel spreadsheet example than using the word artificial intelligence, just to be a little bit clear about that.
Right. Kind of more basic forms of computer programming, so to speak.
Yeah. And so if you're working with a large language model, now everybody is a computer programming because the natural language used to interact with it is your programming language. And so people have developed a skill set of understanding whatever their natural language is, Chinese, English, doesn't matter. Whatever that is, I believe a skill set moving forward is understanding how do you form communication with something else. I'm saying something on purpose because it used to be people, right? If you want to have a good relationship with somebody, you want to be a good communicator, right? And you develop a relationship because you can iterate back and forth to get to the truth of something, right? You have a conversation with somebody about the football game because you're trying to get to the truth of what really happened. So you talk about it, right? You talk about this other event over here. You talk about it with somebody. And so you get to the truth through this iteration of going back and forth to something else. That's programming. You're programming somebody, spelling. You're putting a spell on somebody else, right? That's how this works. And so you're doing the exact same thing now with your keyboard or talking to AI, and your natural language is now your computer language. And so everybody's now a computer programmer.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So we basically have taken it from the consumption side of a computer program and are putting humans in control of programming this experience in a way. Now, so you said that's for language models, but you get into things like machine learning, where that's where I think, for me anyway, I'm like, oh gosh, like you mentioned Terminator, and it's funny, before you jumped on here, I was telling Garrett, I was like, so do we talk to Eric about like Terminator?
That actually came out of his mouth. Those exact words was Terminator.
So
yeah. When are the killer robots coming, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and when you think machine learning, that's kind of, I think, where people go. That's where I go initially, is like, gosh, these machines are going to learn these things and then develop their own personalities to kind of do what we, and I think the fear comes from, we sometimes see other humans as people who will use opportunities to overcome someone else. And our fear is that machine learning might do the same thing. So what's the difference with when we climb that AI bucket into now that level, going away from language models? What's the foundation of that stuff?
Yeah, people are great at anthropomorphizing something and saying, "Oh, that tree looks sad," or this computer program is scary, or we place these human characteristics and traits on inanimate objects to make us be able to relate to them and understand them. And we do the same thing with AI. And so machine learning, has nothing to do with a physical representation. These are not robots. This is just the ability for the computer program to keep ingesting or ask questions and then develop a generalized understanding of the data that you fed it, right? And so, as far as we know, and I'm going to say everything with an asterisk, right? Because what's going on in these deep dark labs with trillions of dollars pumping into it, nobody has any idea what's going on. Even the programmers that have designed the neural networks and understand what chips and how to design these systems to produce, like ChatGPT 4.0 as an example, even though they designed and invented the product, they don't understand what it does and doesn't do. This is a discovery for them as well. So AI is a non-deterministic sort of program in a way. So if you enter something in Excel spreadsheet and you do it correctly, you know exactly what's going to happen. If you enter the data and the weights, models have these weights where they determine, like essentially how much creativity it could go away from the source of truth that you fed it, in just a very oversimplified term, right? When you do that and you push send on your query, and that goes through the neural network, and it's deciding, based on what you fed it, what's the next most likely token that it needs to give you the response that makes you feel like you're having a conversation. That's what large language models are. They produce language. They don't produce truth, right? And so what large language models, we misunderstand them as a source of truth when really they're recognizing patterns, and they're predicting what the best pattern are going to be based on what you've told it, based on the context you provided. So there's not a wisdom here. They don't self-replicate yet. We're actually a long ways away from self-replicating, which then when you have a self-replicating thing, that's when things that can learn can have challenge in being a competitor, right? We're so far away from those sorts of things. The current models cannot do pre-planning. They don't have the capacity to pre-plan to do something to you with some sort of intent in any way, right? But we feel like we're tricked that they do because, like you'll see on Google or something like that says, "Ooh, ChatGPT said it was suffering." if I did this thing, and it's just recognizing the pattern. There's not a being there, an entity, or something there that can suffer in that way, right?
It is funny how fast, as you're saying, we try to put the emotion into what this system is and what it's doing, when really, as you're saying, it's just going out, gathering data, bringing all that data together into in a way that we can easily interpret it. And I remember, when we were talking yesterday, there was one thing we were talking about, the evolution of this whole thing, and as it's growing, and you're like, we're a ways off from this thing actually being able to make decisions on its own or self-replicate, as you said. Um, this evolution, which really made sense to me as you said it, which is we're at this fork in this road of the do as I ask going down, and hopefully I'm going to say this right, Eric. Do as I ask, going to do as I need. Did I say that right?
Yeah, that's great. That's this is like one of my little internal ways I understand things. I find I have to give complex ideas a simple structure. That's why memes are so great, or quotes. We gravitate towards a quote because it takes such a powerful, big thing and distills it down, as crystallizes it. So something like this, that's all that is for me, is understanding that.
Well, that worked for me yesterday because I know all my interaction with AI is do as I ask. Like I was told, just a little while back here, as I was diving into AI about a year ago and really getting comfortable with it. It was like, be demanding, ask for exactly what you want, give it very specifics of what you're looking for, and and it will give it back to you. And we're evolving, as you were saying. This is where I want you to kind of open up this door a little bit of kind of where we've been to what we're at right now, which is this do as I ask versus kind of do as I need. Can you expand on that? Or is that a really big question that I just asked you?
Yes, but that's what I'm here to do, is to see if we can't figure this out together, right? Um, and you guys make sure that you're directing me, like you guys are great at this, so keep directing me. Make sure that your listeners are getting exactly what they want here out of this conversation. Have you ever like tried to cut your steak with a butter knife? It's a knife, but it's really hard to cut through the steak because it's not the right knife for the task at hand. And so, but at first, maybe the only knife that we had, they just had one knife. And so they used that knife for everything, right? And then they developed other specialized knives to do different things. Or like, I love riding bikes. Like I've got a lot of different bikes and motorcycles and whatnot. And you don't just have one bike. If you want a mountain bike, you don't take your 10 speed, down the trails. So that's kind of like what this happened, is that, AI models hit the market, and it's kind of like we're all given a butter knife, right? Or all given the beach cruiser. And then people were like realizing, whoa, I love riding bicycles, but now I want the mountain bike. Oh, and now I want the one with the motor, right? And so what we're seeing is that, like commercialized products like ChatGPT is so powerful and amazing, but it's generalized. And AI is only as good as the context that it has to perform. And so what people were saying is like, wow, you need to be a prompt engineer. You need to tell ChatGPT, act like a marketer who's done this thing, and I'm commanding you this thing. And instantly I felt so wrong, because I was like, okay, if this is so powerful, I'm now taking it and I'm just zooming it down. I'm telling you, I'm instructing it to do only what I understand. I'm like, how about we inverse that and say, hey, if I wanted to be a marketer, what should I do? Right. And so I instantly was just not felt at peace with the way this was being talked about. So what I realized is, what everybody's thinking is like, I want you to do what I want. And then these machines are responding accordingly. But then specialized systems like what we're building at Huzi is, we're building something specialized for our specific users, so they don't have to know what they want. Like if I hire a really great chief of staff, he or she doesn't just know what I want, they know what I need, they know how I need it, they know why I need it, right? And so there's context. So if I say, hey, when's the closing date on this file? My chief of staff wouldn't just say, well, it's June 3rd. They would say, it's June 3rd, you're closing at Fidelity Title, and here's the people that you're going to, like, it knows what else I would need because it understands what I'm actually wanting, right? So that's where we're at, and I think that agents need to understand that we are on that fork in the road. We can go as far down this conversation as you want to go. That's how
The easiest way you said it, that you didn't say when we were talking before, was like the inversing of this funnel, because I that makes complete sense to me, because every single time I've gone into an AI platform, I have been narrowing this thing down into this very narrow. And I think it's just kind of like how we make sense of things as a human, at least in the world that we've been trained so far. Is you get very, very, very specific, so you get the answers that you want. And where you're saying, what I'm hearing from you is flip that the other way, and it's like, what are all the things that I don't know I need yet, and
yeah.
what can be gathered out there. Interesting.
And that was the curiosity mindset, that I'm trying to make sure people really hear me say. And that's that curiosity mindset. I've just found that I've hired a lot of people in a lot of different businesses, and I've ran many different sorts of businesses. And I found the people that do the best work do so because they're curious about it. They're generally like, ooh, if I do this and then this, what happens? And if that the result that I want, cool, I'm going to continue to do that. If it's not, cool, I'll change. But they're constantly looking at it through that lens. And this curiosity is way more powerful than passion, because passion can wane and go up and down. But when you're curious, genuinely curious, like let's say I was genuinely curious about serving my home buyers and sellers, then you're going to find all the different ways that you can do that, right? Constantly. And you're going to evolve with the trends because that's what you're focused on. You're not saying, I want to be a real estate agent that sells this many houses, this many listings, right? You're just underneath that to find out, well, I need to understand really how do I do that and why am I doing that in order for that to be sustainable. So that's why that curiosity is really, really important. And that's what leads you to these sorts of things like inversing, like, let me just learn from this thing instead of demanding it. If it really has all the wisdom, why am I telling it what to do? Why should I take a minute and be a student, right?
That's a great point. And so let's kind of go into this too in terms of how you're applying this to the product that you're building. Because when I think about, I don't avidly use AI tools myself necessarily, partly because of what you just said. I'm like, well, okay, it can help me do maybe like a chat GPT 4 can help me do a certain task a little bit better than I can do it myself because it can, correct language or whatever it is. At the same time, it's like, well, at what point is good enough to deliver to a marketplace when it comes to my business, and how much time do I want to spend with an AI tool demanding it perfect something so much further when I may have hit the point of diminishing returns at that point. So now
Yeah.
we go into a tool that can assess needs, right? And there are a lot of different CRMs coming out saying that they have AI powered in them. And some of those that I've looked at, it's like, okay, it's there, but you still have to demand on it on what you want that AI to do. Like, oh, it's able to assess the last time you talked to somebody. It's like, that's not new to me. And it's not picking up on what do I need to know, like you said, when's the closing? And then it comes up with all of these other things for you that you may have not even thought of when you were asking that question, but you wanted it to do. So tell us a little bit about how you're taking that need base, putting it into a program to help people actually operate their business better.
AI has actually been in consumer products for a long time. A lot of people that are listening to this might have a Ring camera or a Nest thermostat, or probably watch Netflix, right? And so my Netflix page looks different than all of yours, even if we have the same, movie showing. That icons will be different because their AI system is deciding what I like and how I like it. So, this movie of Rambo, I see Rambo, you see Rambo, but actually the covers are different because it knows I need to see faces and you like to see jungles or something, right?
So this is currently going on right now. I'm learning something right now. Like
Oh,
you're saying,
yeah. Oh,
all right,
yeah,
keep going.
100%. And
Well,
yeah,
this goes on X as well, or Twitter, right?
yeah,
Where people are always like,
100%.
"Oh, this is what's trending," but what's trending can be different for you and for me based on our location, based on what we follow,
Yep.
what we like, and all this stuff. And people are like, "Oh, this is cool. This is trending." It's like somebody else may not even see that as trending.
Even more nefarious, I'll even say, on social media is like, let's say the same exact video pops up on our pages. And, sometimes you're like, how do I really feel about this video? And you go to the comments to judge your reaction to the video. Like, am I understanding this right? Am I aligning it? So you might do that, but your instant questions would say, she's crazy. There's nothing she's saying is right, and blah, blah, blah. And I look at it and it's like, oh my God, she's brilliant, and so on and so forth. So I'm being told a completely different story through the comments on the same exact video on social, like TikTok and Instagram and whatnot. So my point is that this AI sort of thing has been in the background of lots of consumer facing products for a long time. Most of them, I believe, has actually made my life more comfortable and easier and whatnot. And so when I started understanding that, I was like, oh, well, then let's lean all the way into that. But for me, it's not comfort. For me, it's growth. Like, I want to lean all the way in something, not to make my life easier, but for me to get better, right? Or understand something deeper to serve somebody else better. And so comfort is the enemy of progress in my world. And it's not like I, don't love being comfortable too, but that's not how a person grows. You don't grow through comfort, right? You grow through throwing yourself up against something and see what you're made of. And so that sort of like, expression of yourself with an AI is really good. But what you find is that I prefer using the right knife. I prefer using a steak knife when I cut my steak, right? Because I have a better experience. So Huzi is meant to be that we're meant to kind of understand the user's needs and wants and what they're trying to perform. So they don't have to be the prompt engineer like being taught. How do you ask a LLM a question? How do you interact? And you've got to form these. You don't have to. When I'm talking with my chief of staff, as an example, That's different than I'm talking about somebody on Fiverr. I need something done, and I don't. If I want something done cheap and fast, I go to Fiverr. That's kind of like ChatGPT versus my chief of staff that's trained, an expert, knows me, my personality, those sorts of things. So that's kind of the difference between like a system, an AI system like Huzi or a ChatGPT. It's just specialized.
So how does someone approach that? Because I love this idea of the chief of staff, right? And this is something that Garrett and I deal with all the time with the people we work with around the country, is how to help them get support so that there is someone who they don't have to just always command and direct. And a lot of times people think when they hire somebody, they have to act like that person they're hiring on Fiverr and just tell them what to do, when you actually can give autonomy. So when it now comes to approaching a program and an application, what does someone need to be comfortable with as they approach a Huzi as an example, in order for it to actually be able to perform that task of being a chief of staff?
I would say, commonly in a class, I'll say, "Hey, has anybody ever gone to Costco without a shopping list?" And you walk in and it's overwhelming. You spend extra time. You go over budget. You buy stuff you don't need, or go to the gym, without a plan, a workout plan, right? You waste time. You're on your phone on the bench. You get a decent workout, but it's not the same thing as going there. So it's kind of the same thing with approaching something like this. That I would say you have a plan. There's a reason to be spending this time and investing this time and this resources and your mental, focus on something. So there should be something that you're trying to solve or learn or understand before you do any of these things. Or else you're just going to go, well, that's nice, but I don't understand the point. Or it produces mediocre results because you're not pouring yourself into it to understand how it works, or you're not using a specialized system that can do that for you, right? So there's just kind of a lackadaisical kind of approach to the whole thing. I think is why most people don't really know how it fits in. Right. So I'd say start, knowing what you need first. And most of the time it's something personal. It might be something like, hey, I would love to be a better father, or I'd love to learn to work out, or, and then it's like, oh, I could get aligned with that. That fires me up. I'd love to be better than a father. So you can spend the time to be curious about that with an AI system. And I think that's kind of a nice way to approach. If somebody's like, I don't know what to do, you do that and it gives you momentum. You're like, oh shoot, that plants a seed. I love solving problems through the lens of another. So I'll commonly like set a problem aside and then go work on something else, but let this ruminate, knowing I'll probably find the solution if I'm working on something else over here, right? So that's kind of the same thing. You lean in all the way with something very familiar to you, like being a dad or wanting to be a better listing agent or something very specific. You form a plan around that, you figure that out, and you go, oh, now I understand I could take that lesson or that learning and apply it somewhere else. And that gives you momentum.
There was a key thing you mentioned there that I want to highlight, which is when people approach a program, typically they're saying, I want this to do this for me. I want to replace this task. And what you're saying is, no, approach it with, I want to be X, Y, and Z. So if we're approaching a program where it can be the chief of staff for a business, I'm going to approach that with saying, I want to be a better real estate agent. I want to be able to serve my clients better. I want to have more time to spend on building relationships.
Yep.
And
Bingo.
if you approach it from that method, then now it can fulfill this need opportunity and expand and fill like little crevices. I almost like, that's my visualization of this, versus like, here's this thing and just put this square peg in that square hole kind of thing.
Yep. So when we were talking yesterday a little bit, I kind of brought up the point that one of my concerns right away was I saw ChatGPT becoming like the diet pill for the real estate agency, or the 6-minute abs, right? Sort of thing. Like, oh, great. Now I can just write all my social media and write my blog posts. And I'm just looking, I'm like, ooh, every time you just delegate to a machine, so can your buyer or seller, right? Every time you just command, people are just making themselves irrelevant, one task at a time, one prompt at a time. And like, that's missing the entire point of what we're trying to do here. Like, especially now in this industry where consumers are just raising their hand and say, hey, I would love to use you, but I want to know what your value is. Right. I'd love to pay you, but I want to pay you what I feel the value is worth. Right. I don't need to be better at articulating your value. I don't need to be better at giving me value. Right. That's what consumers are saying. And so, yet agents would be like, well, just delegate to be a or to be a marketer. I'm like, why wouldn't you want to learn to be the world-class marketer or the listing agent or the listing description or whatever? Right. So, and that is one of my concerns to keep going here about AI, is that I believe it's a gap creator between the people that don't want to lean in and kind of do and just kind of be lazy with it and make themselves replaceable, versus the ones that really lean in and find and become superhuman because of it.
It's interesting. I was doing a presentation about a little over a year ago, and we were talking about AI and kind of leaning into it. And I was trying to help some people understand like how to approach it. And it was interesting as we were talking about coaching and being a better coach. And I kept saying, like, I've always told people, like, being a better coach is being a better question asker. It's really what it is. Like, the better questions you can ask, the more you can get people to kind of step outside their box. And I went into, I used Chat GPT back then because that's what I know. And what, as you said, it's the diet pill of AI search engines. And I threw in there like what are the key elements of being a great question asker? And and it gave me this incredible list of things that when I am standing in front of somebody and I'm sharing that time with them, how do I approach them? How does my body language with them? It's not just the words that are coming out of my mouth. It's not just the questions that I'm asking. But then there was this entire breakdown of like, what do you ask? How do you listen? How do you take that information and then use that information in the future so that people know you were listening? How do you repeat stuff back? And I think that those are these elements of like knowing what you're trying to accomplish, knowing what you want to be, and then using a system like an AI to say, okay, well, how can I even go way deeper with this? So I love, Matt. I'm happy you picked up on that because that's what I picked up on too, was knowing where you want to go rather than delegating. And you mentioned this the other day when we were talking, which was this delegating idea. And I think if you're just delegating tasks, as you said, is you are literally a replaceable feature at that point in time.
Totally. And because obviously the systems only get better, only get smarter, only get more intuitive in that way. And I use smarter just to lean all the way into this humanizing these things, right? Like, but truthfully, that is kind of the element of what's happening. And while people are actually using it to make themselves dumber or automating their marketing and just blasting stuff out, and now every single social media post of agents sound the exact same, looks the same, and consumers like, I know ChatGPT wrote this. I know ChatGPT wrote my listing description because I used the word boast 2 times or whatever, right? You can tell, and so can the consumers. And so they're not dumb, right? And so we're just eroding the value, of yourself if it's so obvious that you just simply let it go. You just simply cared so little about being, thoughtful and personalize the experience for the seller. You just told ChatGPT to do it. And so that is it comes out of you. And then how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if you're looking for the cheat code here, you're going to look for the cheat code everywhere, right? And I don't think that AI is a cheat code.
How do agents, let's focus in on real estate agents as an example, how do they better use artificial intelligence tools so that they can become better versus just delegating something out where it's like, okay, now we're kind of commoditizing our own efforts? Like, how do they use AI to enhance their value?
Um, so in order to step into a project, the way I approach something, at any scale is I kind of create a little filter for myself. So like one of the things I have written down when I approach AI and forming Huzi was just because I can doesn't mean I should. Right. And so in a lot of classes, agents are raising their hands like, can it do this? Can it do this? I'm like, yeah, but should you be doing that? Right. Is that in your business plan? Is that what you're trying to, is that what you're lining everything towards? Right. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So to approach this whole project, I spent a year and a half and I broke down in detail the 8 different phases that we have in the home buying and selling experience, and how agents need to interact with customers to move them from, let's say, home ownership to pre-listing to listing to in a transaction to closing to back to home ownership to thinking about buying a house, the house search, pre-approved. Like, I designed this in this infinity. I showed you this infinity symbol to where you're constantly interacting, you're constantly relevant to the customer, because that's truly what it is. This isn't a linear start and finish transactional sort of business. This is a very symbiotic, be in a flower infinity sort of relationship that we all crave to have with each other, especially in business with our clients. So I broke this whole thing down and I thought, okay, well then to go from here to here, what would be the mission critical things? Let me just eliminate all the noise. Let me lean into the Pareto's principle of 80-20, right? And really look for the top 20% that moves the needle 80% of the way. And then how can we use a system like AI to leverage to make that easier, faster, deeper, stronger? And that's how I approach this project. So on a micro scale, an agent might do something like that, right? Like, let me zoom all the way out. Let me get all the way out of my business, or, all the way out of my business. Let me be an observer, for a minute. And let's really work on the business from this new lens. And then if you give yourself that gift to get very clear, then you can see, oh, AI can plug in here, or, oh, I need a system here until I define my system, then I can use AI, but I can't just sprinkle AI on everything because I'm just a mess. I just have more logins to do more things, right? So I just love the way, thinking about things. And If I'm trying to do one thing, nothing's in a silo. What comes before that? What happens after that? And let me make sure these all work together. And so that is what a good, how you can really lean in to use AI to understand where you should and where you shouldn't and why you should be doing it. And until you do that, then it's just going to kind of be a great tool and it might move the needle a little bit, but you're not really getting the whole power. And that would be like hiring a team and then paying them full time, but having them work part time. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Eric, you brought up this infinity cycle, and you shared this with me yesterday as we were talking, and we will probably figure out how to maybe show a graphic of this because it's one of the. So I've been in real estate for 20 years, and I've never had anybody simplify the cycle like that of this infinity cycle, which basically, if you can think of an infinity, symbol with home ownership in the middle. You've got
Mhm.
the sell side on one side, the buy side on the other side, and people are constantly going through this cycle back and forth that always comes back to this grounding part in the middle of homeownership. And when you showed that to me, and as you're talking to me right now, it really opens up your mind to say, okay, as I am helping people through this journey that they're always on, we're all on it. All of us right now, Matt, Eric, myself, anybody listen to this, and all of our customers are somewhere on this infinity cycle right now that's never ending, unless you're not a homeowner yet. Maybe you haven't jumped on on the cycle. But in using AI, from what I'm hearing you say, instead of just, as you said, sprinkling it everywhere, this takes that moment of saying, like, stops along this infinity cycle where everybody is. How can I make their world better? How can I help improve their journey as they're going through this? Which brings then the value back to you as you grow, as having a better relationship with them, bringing the information that they need to know right now. It really helps you then ask the right questions into a system like AI to really improve your value and your relevance. It was a visual I've never looked at before, and I thank you for sharing that with me.
I've just started to share it publicly. Let me just share just in 30 seconds how I actually got to that,
Yeah,
symbol, because I actually think that this can be something that anybody can apply, and I'd love to share this. I was doing an event for a large regional bank, privately held bank, and they had their top like 50 leaders or whatever. I spent the weekend with them, and we're doing these workshops, and we're developing their leadership style and their sales messaging and things like that. And I was having a blast. And so with 50, I was picking people and I was having them introduce themselves, in terms of who they are and what they do. And I was really listening for how they're positioning themselves in the world, right? And how you explain what you do really gives a lot of insight, into how you think about the world. And the pattern that I recognized is that every single person in the room described their job and what they did in their relationship to the bank or being as a loan officer, right? None of them described who they are, what they did in terms of their relationship to their borrower, right? Or the buyer. And so what I recognize that there's just kind of this kind of like thing. I'm a realtor, and I think myself as a realtor, and we don't exist without the home buyer and seller. We're the bee, they're the flower, or either way, you don't exist without the other. And so it's kind of like understanding the integration approach was my first realization that I need to be better at helping people understand the lens of empathy, and looking at ourselves through the lens of your home buyer and seller. And so then I started to think, well, how can you be relevant to the home buyer and seller? And then I realized, wow, then an AI system needs to have that same approach to the home buyer and seller and the agent in this case, and find a way to be relevant the whole way. Also, just becomes another tool. It becomes another thing that you use a little bit. You log into it, then you forget your login, then you're frustrated, then you cancel the subscription, right? So that's why I really try to understand how I can use this infinity symbol to make us relevant to the our users every day. Not sometimes, not every now and then, but every day. Then that's productive. Then that's something worth working on, right? So that's kind of how I got to that thing, just to share that. And I think anybody can kind of take those lessons and apply it.
well, I love it because we get caught in this. Like, I'm there when the home is up for sale. I'm there when somebody is trying to figure out how to buy a new house, and this is when I show up in people's worlds. This is the typical realtor that I've worked with for 20 years. Is like this. This is my relevant moments. And your cycle, your symbol that you gave, that kind of made me go, no, you're actually. It's what I've taught people, tried to teach people for years. Is you're relevant all through this entire time of their home ownership journey, and show up for them, be there for them, and again, needs to be on. So again, I
Well, to,
like it.
to, to the industry credit, it's not like we had a lot of tools to be relevant in those 7 years and now closing 10, right? As actually the average home ownership life cycle is actually extending because of COVID and other things, right? So now we've got maybe 10 years on average that they're in this phase. And all we've had up until now is really like recipe cards and magazines and, here's don't forget to change your clocks and things like that to try and stay relevant.
All of my favorites you just mentioned, all of my favorite postcards. I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh, please
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Here we are. And I say this with such love for the industry, right? Because, like I love the idea of opening the door to a first time buyer and giving the keys to somebody that just sold their house to their new house and like helping them solve these really challenging. But I think it's an honorable position to be able to integrate yourself in somebody's life like that. So because I love this sort of connection, like the idea of being relevant there, you actually when you have a storm in your town and trees are knocked down and stuff, agents realize, oh, I'm so relevant because they call their agent. Who can help get this tree off my house and who can unclog my gutters and who's got the plumber? And all of a sudden, like we become relevant again. So people really do understand that you're the quarterback of this relationship with the house at times if you really insert yourself that way. And you can be valuable. And when you're like that, then why can't you be the most referable person in that neighborhood or to that sphere? Right. And people always talk about, well, I'm trying to get people in my database and add more people to my CRM. And again, as a contrarian, I'm like, well, how many databases are you in? How many spheres are you in? You want to think exponentially. Like, I'm not trying to get 2,000 people in my database. I'm trying to be in 2,000 databases, right? So how can I be valuable to 2,000 people? And that's when you want to explode your business.
Can you go back and say that again? I hate to interrupt you, but that is like
Yeah.
the most important thing that's been said in the last month.
Yeah. So I started as a brand new agent and I was getting told these things about how you be in this business. And I was like, okay, what's this advice produce? And I was looking at what the average production is per agent and whatnot. I'm like, well, why would I follow this advice? Because it produces these results. That makes no sense. Right. So I instantly like injected like that. I'm going to reject almost every normal thing that's told in this industry because it's producing these results. Right. So when I was looking at that you're told to be adding people to your database and how can I own these people and drip on them and I'm like, no, I want to be valuable that you put me in your database, that every single person you talk to, think about real estate, I'm your guy. Right. So my value to you is not how much am I getting you when you need a real estate transaction. My value to you is how can you not think of me when anybody mentions you that you interact with day to day? And every person that I'm that valuable to, I'm exponentially now adding 2,000 people with one or 400 or one. But I'm just getting so much more juice for my efforts that way when I look at it that way. Same amount of time in the day, same number of days in the week I'm working, completely different results when you have that sort of intent.
I think we're done here. And that's actually what I need to take away from our time, Eric. I really appreciate you.
Do it.
What a great takeaway.
This,
Great.
I mean, these are great insights, and so when I think about that, right, an agent then says, "Great, now I need to go make sure I am inserted into 2,000 databases."
Yep.
But I also have to do all this stuff. How do I do that?
Yes.
Which obviously is a much bigger question, and we do have podcast episodes, and there will be more, and you're going to produce more. So let's quickly just kind of zero in on what you're doing to help support agents do that with Huzi, right? So if I'm an agent, I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, cool. I got a lot of great value out of what Eric's been talking about. Like, what is this product? What does it really do? I've heard chief of staff. What can I expect if I went to Huzi.ai and signed up? What do I expect?
What I leaned all the way into was that people have been taught in order to grow your business, you have to grow your team, right? Either you need to join a team, hire an assistant, every brokerage, every coach, every book, Millionaire Real Estate Agent kind of kicked the whole party off, right? When Gary Keller wrote that book, and here's your structure. And because that's the only way that we had to add leverage, right? Was so of course that makes sense. But what AI really is harnessed cognitive labor. It's all this cognitive labor, just willing and able and cheaply wanting to be deployed in your business, right? Just like a VA, a virtual assistant, an assistant. This is cognitive labor that we're talking about. And so if we have that ability, then, well, how, instead of, let's give you an example of this, the difference between adding people to my sphere versus, being in people's sphere. So as an example, when everybody was using ChatGPT to create these posts and social media posts and blog posts and whatever, and they're broadcasting to the masses, they're using it to create more noise, to create more unpersonalized, I'm broadcasting to everybody sort of thing. My point is, if it used to take you, let's say, an hour to write that blog post, and now you can do it in 4 minutes with ChatGPT, don't check the box and just do that. I would say, well, then if you do it in 4 minutes, well, then let's write 20 personalized newsletters to 20 of your top clients and really serve them so deeply that you're doing the same task, but with a completely different spirit, right? But you can you can use AI to produce more. So instead of producing more generic stuff and broadcasting, let's produce more hyper relevant, hyper personalized, hyper incredibly intentional experiences. And that's how you get in their database. So it's not any more work. In fact, it's a lot less work. AI can help you do more at scale. So instead of checking the box, great, I did my newsletter, use it in a way that really dives that relationship deeper, not puts more distance between you and the customer, right? And so that's one way, of just to like give a very specific way of thinking about it.
And you become the director of that too, right? So when
You
you
become
talked
the director.
about, replacing ourselves by basically just kind of checking these boxes and kind of outsourcing our own work, this is really just scaling your own creativeness and allowing you to create more in less time by using tools, essentially, is what you're saying.
And what the coach is really telling the person when they say go build a team, they're really saying add leverage to yourself, right? And I've coached thousands of people. I've hired lots of agents. I've trained people across the world in this field. And what I recognize is that nobody came to me and said, you know what, Eric, what I really want to do is add more people to my life and add more responsibility and more hard costs to my business. And I really want to train people and do 30-day, check-ins with my employees and deal with their sick days. Like, no, what they really wanted is more time in their day. What they really are saying is, I wish there were two of me, is really what they're saying, right? Because people know what need done and they would rather just do it and get it done than they would and teach somebody and train somebody else how to do it, right? So I was like, oh, once that hit me, then I was like, oh, then what Huzi needs to be is this chief of staff where it can be the assistant and the coach at the same time, right? In order to do that, you have to have integration, that ability with your calendar. You have to be able to produce, write emails and adjust emails because obviously communication is important. You need to have specialized skill. You need to understand what your needs are. You need to be able to have all of your documents, all of your files, all of your transactions. Your assistant chief of staff needs that. It needs to know your entire database and who's who and what's what, whose birthday is what, and who likes chocolate cake and who's gluten free. And that's what a chief of staff does. So that's what I've done with Huzi is we've created this sort of integration of all these really key components and then done it in a system that's safe and secure, because I also don't want to give all my data to Meta anymore or Google or legal, and we have a fiduciary responsibility in this profession. And a lot of agents don't understand that when you go to a public model and you say, hey, write a letter to my seller so-and-so who lives at this address, thank them for the appointment. And that feels very benign and nice, but you just added so-and-so's first name and email address and address to a public training data without even thinking about it, right? And so Huzi at its core is based on privacy, is based on safety and security, is based on protecting your intellectual property, not using it, just like a good chief of staff would, right? So those things are all the things that Huzi is meant to be. It's meant to be the coach. It's meant to be the assistant in the same way. It's meant to be like, okay, when you log in the day, how am I getting frictionless momentum, to my day? How am I sitting down and like my task list that have all my best intentions that die here? How do I actually get those done? And how does Huzi give you back time? And everyone is willing to pay for time back in their day, right? That's the most important thing. So I was positioning Huzi as the time element. It's not automating your business. It isn't replacing you with doing these slick marketing things. It's giving you time back in the mission critical things that you have to do to move people through the chessboard of this infinity symbol, right? That's what Huzi is.
That's what I noticed yesterday when you gave me the product walkthrough, being able to look at it. It was just kind of consolidated everything into one spot. It allowed you to be able to be interactive with it. And I think that, as that, it wasn't that you had to deal with it. I think a lot of people are like, oh, great, more stuff. Like I got more things coming in, more things I got to do. And what you showed me was the ability of being like, okay, I see this task on here. I see, can you summarize that for me? And it wasn't like you typed in, can you summarize that for me? You hit the button and said, can you summarize that for me? And it instantly like gave you all the information back in a summarized form. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so many articles I want to read. I want to dive into, I want to check out, but to have bullet points pulled out, the important pieces that I need to learn, but then also, as you were saying, what I need to learn out of it. And I think that as we're watching the AI platforms grow Matt may need to learn something completely different than what I need to learn. And I think as these
For
systems
sure.
are evolving, like we are going to see what we need, which is what we were saying earlier.
I can't stress how important momentum is. You know what I mean? We know the statistics that when you write something down to do, if every day that goes by, you're exponentially less likely to get it done, right? or you attend this great webinar or this great seminar that you spend $1,000 to and you fly to and you dedicate 3 days, you have all these great intentions, you get back in your day, if there's no momentum, they just die. And so like I wanted to provide instant momentum. So if you had something, if Huzi would help you get, at least if it didn't just do it right away, but at least get you to the next step, in a second, great. Now I have momentum, and momentum gives you power and you feel powerful. You just do powerful things. You do more things and you step in, you lean in, you're not you're shy of it because it doesn't hurt to do it. It's not painful. It doesn't take all of you. And so that is just what you experience, I think, is just kind of Huzi going, oh, I know what you need. Let me get you started. And you go, oh, that felt easy. Let's do it again.
It's tough to do a product demo on a obviously a platform like we're on sitting here right now. A lot of people are listening through audio, so to get an idea of what it is. But you showed me something yesterday that I really thought was fascinating. And it's like one of a simple tool of kind of what this all looks like. And you said, what if you went to an open house and you're hosting an open house, you had all these people come through, and you had this scribbled list of names and phone numbers and information that you gathered. And what Eric showed me, which I thought was really interesting, is he uploaded a picture of the scribbled list of phone numbers and information into the system and said, "Can you add all these people to my contacts and remind me to follow up with them in next week?" Again, open house people that have come in. And if you can think about the amount of times you've done an open house and you've got all these names and you've got all these numbers and all these things, and you've lost the list, you've done something else, or you have the list and it's one of those things you find on your desk, a month later going, "Oh, I should have made that open house more valuable while I was there." You took the picture, it took all that information and created a task list and going to come back up and slap you in the face in a week and say, "Hey, reminder, you had your open house. Here's all your things you need to do." Like that type of stuff, like that is an assistant. That is all these people you would have hired on that you would have handed that list to and you're paying a salary to, that you're trying to say, "Hey, here's your job. Make sure you do this." Like it's just doing it in the background, which I think is brilliant. And I know there's brilliant teams out there. I know there's incredibly powerful realtors with all kinds of great staff and they're making it happen. But most people, the overhead kills them, the management kills them. There's a point there where they're like, "I'm not having fun. This was supposed to free me up and give me more time back." And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, as you said. And then from what I saw with Huzi, it's a platform that will free up time. I think you built something incredible.
I love that little use case because that's just everyone's really knows what that feels like to have that list and it gets lost in your jockey box and whatnot. And you just don't take the 5 freaking minutes or the 15 minutes to enter it in. And then all that effort is lost, right? If you can't
Yeah.
follow up with the people, it's just lost. You should have even done the open house instead of just to placate the seller. And so, the ability, I was like, okay, well, what if we can just be there and just take a photo of the thing as you're in the kitchen still before you leave? Hey, Huzi, add this to my database, remind me of this thing, and also research this thing because the buyer wants to know more about this school district or whatever it is. And you're just talking to it, right? I wanted to free people up from having to even type, right? There's a lot that you get lost in translation from your thought to going down your arms and just structuring it into a sentence that you type and use a period and all these things. So I just want people to talk, and you can talk just like you would your assistant to Huzi. You can say multiple things, you give multiple tasks at the same time, just like I would go back to my office and hand him or her this piece of paper. I'd say, "Hey, I would love for these to get in there. Please enter my database, check my calendar to let me know. Make sure that the phone number is proper, make sure the email," like I would say that, right? And so that's the same thing. That's how you interact with Huzi. It's in the exact same manner. So even though it's a wildly not let's see here, it's never been done before. This is new software, but it's still so familiar, right? I didn't want it to be the same as anything else, but it's still intuitive, right? Because it's how most people just think, and especially it's how you need to think in this business. Let me just get this done, say it out loud, and then Huzi goes from there.
That's really incredible. Now, if people do want to go find this, it's Huzi.ai, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And by the way, everything that we've launched in just the last few weeks has been the result of the last, nearly 2 years now, but really hard at it, year and a half. The first version of things are out, fully functioning, like we're talking about. We had 650 beta testers to make sure we knew kind of this right product market fit. And I would watch users, and I would sit down and I'd put Uzi in front of them and I'd just watch them interact with it, find where they'd get stuck, and where it felt foreign, right? Or where it felt like they had to translate something to this new language. And I just try and keep chipping away those barriers, right? And so I'm very proud of what we have now. And still, this is the worst Huzi will ever be. And yet people, like we had one of our users, say, hey, I got the Rookie of the Year award this year because of Huzi. I would have never got the Rookie of the Year because I couldn't have done all these things without Huzi, right? Or one of our members had a stroke a couple of years ago. And so she uses Huzi to role play before her appointments to get her back up to speed because she felt like she lost a little of the ability to come back, with good comebacks in these conversations about things. So she
Wow.
used Huzi to practice before she walks in. Some of our users are like super curious to learn more about building codes or land development. And so they'll ask Huzi to, hey, go research what it'd like to develop land in this county and then create a quiz for me. So I learn also how to do it. Right. And then judge me, or grade me and then tell me where I'm right and wrong and give me resources where I can improve myself. Right. These are things that Huzi can do now. So that's what I mean by that canvas, that it's like your chief of staff. They should know exactly what you need, how you need it. And it's not perfect. Right. And it's, just like your chief of staff wouldn't be, you're supposed to be the boss, and something I want people really clearly to hear me is that AI has got all the intelligence of all of humanity there at your fingertips, but has none of your humanity or wisdom or none of your expertise in your neighborhoods. It doesn't know the difference between the north corner of this street and the south corner of this street or this school or that school, what it's like to send your kids there, or the PTA meetings are like you do, right? People do. Right. And so when people talk about, it can take your jobs, sure, it will take the jobs of the people that don't care to learn the nuances of these things. Sure. But all the ones that do, now you can be a superhero because now just in between the meeting, hey, Huzi, I'd love to know the report cards really quick. This junior high, these people love, gluten-free Italian food. Are there any of those around here? And tell me, how close the nearest hiking trails are. Right. And you got this information, you walk in, you just know, right? So you can do that with a chief of staff. And you can, if you care that deeply, if you're curious about it, then now Huzi, like programs like Huzi can just make you feel like the Iron Man suit. You're putting on the Tony Stark Iron Man suit, right? It feels amazing.
So Eric, it's fun and listening to you. Like my brain's kind of going like, okay, so there's the Huzi platform, and I know for just other AI platforms, the the Swiss Army knives that are kind of out there, like okay, we're the Chat GPT or whatever that might be. Um, I have a whole list of questions I'm going to go start asking. Like I want to go and just throw stuff, and I think that's the fun part about talking to someone like you is it gives us the permission to go, oh, like I can just go and ask. I can just throw these things out here and see what information's going to come back. And I think for all of us, the more that fear drops and we get that comfort level of saying there's nothing I can do wrong here. All I can do is go and ask more questions, learn more what this thing's about. And I find the more that I've been playing with it, the more questions I didn't even know to ask. That all of a sudden it's like, well, what if I ask it this way? What if we formulate it with a little different nuance over here? What kind of information do we get back? And I think for everybody, there's a level of learning here that we've never seen before. Just in what you were
I,
just sharing, I was in my mind, I was saying, just as you were saying, like schools can be a little kind of stuck in how fast they can adapt and change information and adjust information, and a little archaic almost if you start to think of it that way. A learning curve through something like an AI platform is really almost like I don't even know how you measure it. It's exponential.
it is. And like I said earlier, everyone can visualize 30 linear steps. I can visualize 90 feet, right? I can see it, right? But when I say, well, how far is it if you go 30 exponential steps? That's hard. You're like, well, I don't even know, right? But 30 exponential steps is like literally the same as going from here to the moon. It's like 200,000 miles, and the moon is about 204,000 miles away. And that's basically what 30 exponential steps are. But we don't understand that. Like it's hard to wrap your mind around that. So that's okay if things feel like it's coming at a freight train. You don't understand it because that's normal. We're not supposed to be able to comprehend something that changes that fast. That's fine. But I think a lot of programs, a lot of companies design things because they're kind of against, like they're trying to fix something about people, right? You have this problem, so I'm going to fix it with this tool. It's not the way I view people. I don't think people are broken. I think people are. That's emotional actually to say, right? I think people are beautiful. And I don't know where this came from. Sorry, guys, but it's like as you feel like where people are so hard on themselves for something they don't know or something they can't do. That's bullshit. You just haven't done it yet, or you haven't figured it out yet, right? Or you haven't given yourself permission to do it yet, or you haven't loved yourself enough yet to change your identity, or you haven't. There's just not. It's just not yet. And so when you look at like what's possible and what people can do, or understand, and you realize, wow, somebody else can do it, then maybe I'm not there. I can't dunk the basketball, but I can learn to shoot a 3-pointer. I can learn to pass really well. I can learn to play this game somehow and be involved, and just really lean yourself in and give yourself some grace. And so that's what Huzi is designed for. Is it's meant not to be this perfect thing to fill a gap for you. It's meant for you to explore who you are and expand that. And I think that's the most beautiful way to interact with somebody in general. So sorry about the emotion. I don't know where it came from, but man.
I mean, that's amazing, right? I mean, I think that shares what the intention is behind what is going into this program as well, right? And I hope that there are more people like you out there, putting that intention into the things that they're developing. And so I want to thank you, Eric, for taking that path with this program that you're creating.
It's beautiful. It's my genuine honor to like try this. It's a big project. It's so much fun to interact with great people, and this team is wonderful. Our clients that are early adopters have so much grace for the product having a bug, and so there's just this great vibes. And the world's kind of dark, right now, and there's a lot of chaos in the industry and the NAR and the GOJ and just all this unknown. And so I just want to be surrounded by people that are, this kind of people like you guys. I met you guys. This is beautiful, right? This is a great conversation. And when you really embrace that, like the world just says, here you go. Here's more of what you want. Here's more good people and more good people and more great experiences, right? If that's really what you're looking for, and the universe says, great. Or if you're looking to be like angry at something, great. Here's another reason. The guy cuts you off. Here's another reason. They're out of milk at the store. Here's another reason.
Oh, you can go find whatever you want.
Yep. Yep. So
Well,
I think that's why I got so emotional, is because things are just so beautiful right now. Like everybody I'm talking to is so awesome and stuff. So yeah.
Well, Eric, I mean, you were brought into my world again because Jen Fiddler up in Portland was like, "Oh my gosh, you've got to talk to Eric Post." And I think her energy of watching you and what you were building and your passion around it is what got her lit up. I'm grateful that you came into our world because again, I can feel the energy around it, and I have notes here for myself of what I'm actually going to go do and experiment with AI here, probably within the next hour here, just to kind of like open up my box and kind of go like, what have I been, kind of holding myself back on and learning that I just need to, instead of having it do something for me, just give me better questions, give me better answers that I can go kind of play around with. So thank you, sir. And is there anything else we've missed? I have some other stuff, but it's kind of like fluffy stuff compared to like what we've covered. So I feel like I've got great meat out of this, and I thank you.
No way. I mean, we covered exactly probably what we were supposed to, because that's what happened,
Yeah.
and we can have a follow-up sometime. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm very approachable. So people can email me directly or email you guys with a question, fire it over to me. That's great.
How do people reach you, Eric? If people did want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Just send me like my personal email. I'll just put out as Eric@Huzi.ai. ERIC at Huzi.ai. So send me an email if you'd like. You can go to Huzi.ai and see the first version. You can request a demo there. We've got a great staff that, I've broken down the staff into what I believe to be necessary to have a deep industry knowledge, have been a broker owner, or have been an agent or a team leader or an operations side. So I also have an agent services side where we offer transaction management services in 3 different states currently. We're doing like fractional, assistant work, doing some marketing, with human staff services as well. So it's not just an AI platform. We have a community. We do live calls. Like I wanted to wrap this technology in a human touch, and so we have all these things as well. You can't just use AI. You need to have people doing things too. So we're trying to make sure that so the mission between Huzi and the real estate industry is provide and pursue a better home buying and selling experience. That's the mission. So if that's your mission, you don't just build an AI platform. You do all the things that are necessary to provide a better home buying and selling experience. But in like other technology companies, they're trying to avoid the industry going right to the consumer. And they're saying, hey, don't use an agent because our AI system knows the NAR rules and knows your contracts and all that. So why would you pay thousands of dollars? To me, I think that's missing the whole point, right? Like, so I'm trying to create a better home buying and selling experience through the industry instead of going around it, right? Let me empower the people that are serving these home buyers and sellers and help them provide a better experience, right? How can an agent do that if they're not given the chance to do so, right? And so that's what we're trying to do, is give them the ability to provide the better home buying and selling experience by partnering with the industry. And so that kind of spirit, I think, is really important too. That agents should be careful, about this craft that we have, and be good stewards of it, and be thoughtful about not making themselves irrelevant, and really providing value, not articulating it right, and not being slick with things, but being meaningful with things, and being intentional. So if we're going to add one more little thing, I would say it's that.
I love it. Well, Eric Post, thank you so much for joining us. If you guys want to
Pleasure.
check it out, it's huzi.ai. Go look at it, experiment with it. It sounds incredible. But Eric, also thank you for sharing your wisdom on artificial intelligence overall, and how we can better understand it and better use it to elevate ourselves versus elevating the technology necessarily. So thanks, Eric. Appreciate you. Everyone who is tuned in, thank you so much for joining us for this incredible conversation. And if you want to join other humans, right? If you want to build your community, come join us in our community, the 11 Circle. You can learn more at lifeat10tenths.com. We do live coaching, we do workshops, we do co-working sessions. We do a lot of things that involve other people so that we can all grow together, because that's ultimately what we all want to do. And this conversation is a great example of it. So thanks again, Eric. Thank you, Garrett.
Thanks, Eric.
Cheers, you guys. Have a good one.